As a real CSS expert and an incredible educator, Kevin really has conveyed so much about CSS to so many people that has just been inspiring and so very valuable. Now, we all know that the right way to do layout in CSS is tables and spacer GIFs. That's the way to do it. But Kevin seems to think that there's a better way to do it. And creating compelling layouts, powerful layouts, responsive layouts, flexible layouts is hard, but it's getting easier all the time with the evolution and the maturing capabilities of CSS. We might not all know about those to the same extent, but luckily we have a man who can tell us all about it. So please go absolutely wild as we welcome Kevin Powell.
Thank you so much, Phil. Hello, my front-end friends and UX, UI designers, everyone who is here. I'm really excited to be here today to be able to talk to you about creating smart layout patterns with modern CSS. And I do want to get to the point that we have smart layout patterns in the title. Some people might be wondering, based on some of the talks so far, the general zeitgeist of what's going on these days, if this is the direction of this talk. It won't be, don't worry. Well, I'm sure some people wish it was, but no, we won't be doing that because we are talking about modern CSS, and it's things that we're still trying to figure out, which means we haven't figured it out. Our soon-to-be machine overlords don't have the training data yet that they need to know how all this works either. And speaking of modern CSS, holy moly, the last 4 or 5 years have been this like fire hose of new features just coming fast and furious. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because it can be really hard to keep up with it all. Talking to people, that's one of the common themes that I've been hearing a lot, is just how do I keep up with it? And it's hard, for sure. But it also means that a lot of things that were really hard to do are becoming easier, and things that were impossible before are now possible, which is really, really good. And I'm also happy that this just seems to keep on going, because for like a selfish reason, because as Phil alluded to, I have a YouTube channel. I have over 1,000 videos about CSS now. And despite that, there's no shortage of topic ideas. And I have a big list, and it just seems to keep getting longer. Today, though, we will be talking about something that I have talked about before, which is container queries, and sort of where they are now, where they're going, and a few different things, and how we can start creating some smart layout patterns with them. Yesterday, Christine gave us a nice introduction to them, but I want to give you a quick reminder on what a container query is, why it's useful, what we can do with it, and how it's different from a media query. So in this example page that I have here, we have this layout that just stacks and then goes to 3 columns. And I'm doing that using a media query, just say 3 columns at this breakpoint. The problem is, if this layout gets bigger, that bottom section falls into a sidebar. And now we've broken our layout. The reason for that is the media query can only look at the size of the viewport, and this is the type of thing that container queries solve, or one of the things that they can solve. And the syntax between a media query and a container query is super similar. We just switch our media out for a container, and it breaks their layout. So this is one of the frustrations that comes up with them. But the reason this is happening is because we have no columns at all. And the reason this is happening is because the browser knows with a media query, it's looking at the viewport. With a container query, it doesn't know what the containers could be. Anything could be a container. So we have to define them. So if I come up here and I say aside, and I have my article as well, article, I can say those are both container type of inline size, and that will turn them into a container query that's looking at their inline size, so left to right, and my columns come back with the bonus that when we get to a larger screen size, now the stuff in the sidebar can stack because it doesn't have a lot of room, whereas the main content area adapts, and it works across all different screen sizes now, all the way down. And in other words, you could probably make the argument that they're smarter than a media query. Or maybe not smarter, but at least more aware of what's going on. They can see the different parts of the page. And they seem like a really cool thing. Christine was talking about it, saying how this makes a lot of sense to be going and using things like container queries. And this was the general feeling around container queries when they were first coming around. Everybody sort of thought they were going to take over. But interestingly, adoption for them has been really, really low. And I think that's a bit of a shame, so I'm hoping to change your minds around that today a little bit on some of the things we can do with it. Here's the sad but true truth of it. We're currently, this is the stats from webstatus.dev, which if you visit a site using Chrome, it tracks all the web features that are being used. And so, well, some of you might say, this isn't so sad, Kevin. Like, active sites that people are currently visiting, it's up to 18% of sites that are using container queries, and it's trending upwards. Isn't that a really good sign? It's a modern web feature. We haven't figured it all out yet. But if we compare it to another feature that has slightly worse browser support, they came out almost at the same time, but container queries were around a little bit sooner, so they're at baseline widely available now. And the newly available just means it's in all browsers, but it's been less than 2.5 years. So has is at 48% of sites that people are actively visiting. These numbers are very rough, but it gives us a general idea. So almost 50% of sites that people are actively visiting are using has, whereas less than 20% of sites are using container queries. That's a huge discrepancy. And especially, browser support's not the issue. So I wanted to get down to what the issue was, because I was really excited about them. I made that playlist, made a whole bunch of videos. So I asked my audience. I have a big audience. I did a poll, and I said, are you using container queries? And if you're not, why aren't you using them? And the general feedback that I was getting was that they couldn't come up with good use cases for them, which seems crazy at first. But based on the intrinsic design patterns we have with Flexbox and Grid, as well as the way we've been using media queries for about 18 years now, longer. The spec was first in like 98, but I think it took a bit longer before we actually got them. But we've been using container queries, or sorry, we've been using media queries forever now. We've come up with really good patterns that work really well. The classic methods are enough, so we haven't been using them. And in a way, I wasn't surprised to hear this, because, well, I got really excited about them. I made a whole bunch of videos on my channel about them. The truth is that for a long time, I wasn't really using them much either. I was running into the same problem where I couldn't figure out, like, I'd be building stuff and I just didn't run into situations where I was like, oh, the container query will solve this for me. I was using the intrinsic patterns and all these other things instead, and it worked fine. Until I discovered some new things about them. And I had a realization, which is that we've been using container queries wrong. It's not your fault that you've been using them wrong. If anything, it's my fault. I made those videos that didn't win anybody over. But no, if we're going to blame anything or anyone for this, it's the media query. Or I'm going to blame the media query anyway. Media queries are great, but because we've had them for so long, we've been trained that something that looks like this works in a pretty specific way, and we should be using it in a pretty specific way. Width greater than, this is the range syntax, by the way. You can use greater than, less than these days. Support's pretty good for it. Much easier than min width and max width, in my opinion. So if your width is greater than something, apply some conditional logic and change the layout. Container query. If the width is bigger or smaller than something, change the layout. It really does feel like it's two things trying to do the same thing. And at first glance, you won't run into, you see the demos, the one Christine showed with the cards is a really common one, the one I showed is a common one. But beyond, when you're getting into the nitty-gritty, they really do feel very similar. And of course, you go back to the one that you knew, instead of using the new one that has these weird side effects and these other things. And it makes sense why people haven't been using it. But if we're going to start using container queries more, we need to change our approach in how we're using them, because they're not the same feature. At the end of the day, I guess the goal is similar, but they're a very different feature that has a lot of different capabilities. And as I like to say, they're a lot smarter. So the first thing I love about media queries, or container queries, is dealing with breakpoints. One of the most common questions I get asked is, how do you pick a breakpoint when dealing with media queries? And I'm always like, well, sort of, you mess around with your web page and you pick a number. It's always a magic number. Maybe you look at Tailwind or Bootstrap breakpoints, you just steal one of those. And it works. But with media queries, we can work with intrinsic layouts, which are fantastic. Whoops, wrong demo, this one. We can work with our intrinsic layouts and create smart breakpoints, or breakpoints that are based on the content in our intrinsic layouts. So in this example, I have this intrinsic layout. There's no breakpoints. It's just being done with a grid autofit over here, which just automatically adds a new column. As soon as there's room for like 200 pixels of extra space, it squeezes a new column in there. And it will just keep adding new columns or removing them as it's getting smaller. And maybe my designer comes to me and they go, Kevin, when this gets to 3 columns, we want the featured card to go across 2, span across 2 columns. So you go, OK, no problem. You set up a media query. And then you start moving the browser around to try and figure out where that should happen. You get your magic number, which it's really small probably for you, but it's about 709 pixels, I think. So, whoops, I'm on a little low. Right here, if my width is greater than 709 pixels on my media query, we're going to span across 2 columns. And then the designer comes back, they go, oh, that actually works pretty good. I think you're off by like 1 pixel. Maybe you could fix that. But before you even bother fixing that, could you also change the padding on the parent? You made it way too big. It should only be 1 rem. So OK, no problem. I'll change that. But now that 1 pixel difference is even more because your whole breakpoint just changed because this is happening at a completely different space now. And then so you change that, and it's a back and forth. You add a sidebar. The whole thing falls apart. You go back to your magic number. It's a nightmare. You never want to do that. With container queries, I've already set up a container type here. So I can now use my container query. So I'm going to switch my media out for a container. I'm going to take this 709 off. And I want to say a very big thank you to Miriam Suzanne for telling me that you can use a calc inside of here. You can also do this with media queries, but I haven't found a huge use case for it. So I can say, well, I know I have my columns minimum size is 200 pixels. I want to do this when I have 3 columns. And I have those gaps that I have to account to as well. So I can do the math of all of that there. And if I do that, that breakpoint is going to be at exactly the right place. And if I come up to here and I change the padding or I add a sidebar or there's any layout changes, it doesn't matter, because we're not looking at anything else. We're only looking at the size of that grid to be able to make this change. And I'm using, there's a little bit of subgrid in here to line things up. And then they come back and they say, we want to do the same thing, but at 4 columns, we want to change it again. You just take the same approach. 4 columns, no problem, 200 pixels times 4. This time we have 3 gaps, so I say plus 3 rem. And when I make that change now, when I get to 4 columns, I can change the layout again. And I know it's going to be consistent all the time, no matter what I do. One question I'm going to invariably get, so I'm going to answer it now. These cannot be variables yet. Maybe one day, but for now, we do have to hard code them. Just putting a comment like I've put here would make it pretty straightforward what's happening and shouldn't lead to too many questions. And that does mean that if these numbers from the original grid change, that you would have to adapt things. But I'll take that over magic numbering a media query any day. Actually, I don't want to leave that yet. So I think that's already a big win. We can start coming up with smarter breakpoints. We can do this with an intrinsic layout, which is always something that was difficult with media queries. But we can also start using new units. And this is really exciting, because with a media query, you generally don't see too many people who use either rem or m with media queries. There is a case to be made that you should. I'm not going to get into that. If you want, come see me after, and we can talk about it. But there is a limitation to doing it, because it's getting that font size from the browser settings. It doesn't get the rem value from anywhere in your CSS file. Whereas if you do this with a container query, it actually sees the font size that is of that container. And that might not seem like a big deal, but this allows us to create content-first breakpoints. So here's a very similar example to the first one I did, with just 3 columns stacking and going back. I just did it with Flexbox instead of grid, because just why not? And what I want to do is change this, or sorry, not what I want to do, but you can see this is being done with a rem over here. And if I go up to my font size and I change the project's font size, it's going to cause havoc, because the font size got bigger, but the breakpoint didn't adjust, because that rem from the media query is looking at the browser settings, nothing coming from my HTML file. And now I get overflow, and it's not very nice. I've already set up a container, so I can come here, switch this out for a container, and now it will fix that problem, because it's aware of that font size change, and everything's working. And this is already, I think, a nice win right there. And if we drop this back down, it will adapt with it and shrink. The break point will be much narrower. But you might be thinking, well, Kevin, you just told us we don't need magic numbers anymore. 50 rem feels like a magic number. You'd be right. It is kind of a magic number, just like a pixel value here would be a magic number. But I could change this out for a different relative unit, which would be 90 ch. If you don't know the ch unit, it's for the width of characters. So I'm saying if the width is about 90 characters long, that's where this breakpoint's going to come in. There's lots of designers here. So the concept here is that if my columns get to about 30 columns, or 30 columns. If my columns get to about 30 characters width, they're going to stack instead, because at 30 characters wide, we're getting pretty narrow, especially because there's some padding and some other stuff that's in here as well. So now when I do that, we're switching at this breakpoint, which is each column getting to a minimum size of about 30 characters. And if we change the font size, like we already saw, it will adapt with that and follow it. And I'm doing this on my HTML element. This could be component by component, or however you do need to be working. And now we can see the breakpoints all the way out here instead, once again breaking at a minimum column size of 30 ch. Well, 30 for each column, 90 total. You could also do that with a calc if you wanted to. So I think that's kind of fun. We can start using other units in ways that allow us to do content-first breakpoints, which is, I think, a really good way to work. It falls more in line with the intrinsic patterns that a lot of people are using now with CSS. And we can actually break into other new units as well. And I wish I could say I thought of this. I did not. I got this a few years ago, this idea from Andy Bell, reading a blog post of his. I definitely encourage you to check it out. It's a really good blog post. And all the way at the bottom of this pretty long blog post is this innocuous enough looking code snippet. And at first glance, it doesn't look like anything special, but I was looking at it a bit, and I noticed something kind of weird. His container query has a min width of 70 VW. And I was staring at that at my computer, just like, I couldn't wrap my mind around what the purpose of this would be at all. I eventually read his article and understood more of what was going on. But it looks really strange, and the reason it looks strange is, once again, the fault of the media query, because he would never do this. We use pixels with media queries, and that's it. We don't worry about anything else. And this, not only would we not do this, it's completely pointless to do this, because you'd be saying, are you bigger than 75% of yourself? Because we're looking just at the viewport size anyway. So of course, we don't think of something like this inherently, because we never would have done this with a media query. Whereas with a container query, all of a sudden, this is doing something a lot more interesting. With the container query, we're querying two different things: the width of the viewport and the width of a container, and we're comparing them to each other. And if you're wondering why you would ever want to do that, it's a good question. As I said, it took me a minute to figure that out as well. But it actually opens up, in certain situations, the ability to do wrap detection. And this is what Andy did in his post. So I'm doing like a modified version of his demo that's very exaggerated, and maybe not best practice, but it's very visual, so it's a nice demo. Where I have this split class set up, where we're just going from 2 columns to 1 column based on the size of the screen. And you can see here, I'm doing this just with Flexbox and a Flex wrap. There's no breakpoint, there's nothing else. I'm just relying on an intrinsic layout. And inside of that split class, I have this wrap detector set up. I want to detect when this wrap happens. Let's visualize that a little bit. I should have had this ready, but we'll do a border of 10 pixels dashed hot pink, just so we can actually see something on the page. And I did that on the wrong line. I apologize. That should have been on my wrap detector itself. There we go. So the wrap detector is a container type of inline size, and I did give it a container name. You have the ability to name containers. You don't have to, but it does allow you to specify a specific container that you might want to look at with a container query. And now, on my hero image, I have a container query looking at my wrap detector, and I'm going to say if the let's do logical properties this time. Inline size instead of width is greater than 75 VI, which is viewport inline instead of viewport width. We want to change the height of the image, or the block size of my image, to make it much smaller. And when I get to this point, you can see it shrinks down. And it's because that pink box, which is my wrap detector, is now stretching a much bigger amount of space, and it realizes, oh, I'm really big. Now the image sees that, and it shrinks. Now, there's other ways of doing this. You might want to use a picture with a source set, and other things. Don't load in giant images just to crop 90% of it away. But again, it's a very visual demo, so I do like it. And I had a version of this talk when I first started where I had a second part that had a problematic part, like finish to it, that I've since fixed, and I'm really excited. This is one of the first times I share this. And if I come down to here, I'm going to on-comment this. I'm going to do this kind of fast. All the links for these code pens are available on the last slide. There's a single link where you can get them all. So if you want to dive deeper into it, you can. And what I've done now, sorry, code pen is jumping around on me a little bit. But I've just added more of the exact same thing that we just had. But as my screen gets bigger, this is going to go to a 3-column layout, and my wrap detector breaks. And it breaks because this pink box is not taking up 75% of the viewport, but the content inside is wrapped. And when I saw that, I said, I don't think this is actually going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. And it did work, and it was very exciting. So my pink box is my wrap detector. The purple boxes that are making up the columns, those are also somewhere else in the code, are containers as well. So you need to have layered containers for this to work. And then you can actually switch this viewport unit for a container query unit. And if I switch that over, now you can see these images are also detecting that they're wrapping down at the bottom. And so it creates a bit more of a consistent pattern no matter where you're using the item, which is pretty cool. Some container inception where the container is looking at its container to get its size. It's a bit weird, but it works, and I think it's pretty neat that we can do stuff like that. And I think already, like, if you start seeing that there's some potential for container queries once you start going, OK, they are different from a media query, and I'm going to start using them in different ways and start trying to be more creative. We can start getting layouts that adapt based on content-first breakpoints. We can start working with intrinsic layouts and making smart decisions there. But there's a really nice thing with container queries is they've continued to get better. Because so far, we've only looked at container size queries. And those are the ones that align mostly with media queries. But the media query, at least in terms of size, sort of rested on its laurels. It came around 20 years ago, and it's happy, and everyone's using it. But container queries have continued to evolve. And the first evolution that's come has been style queries, or container style queries. These are really, really exciting. You'll see that the support here, it's currently not in Firefox. Very exciting. Intent to ship was 2 days ago, so it's coming to Firefox in 151, which is just around the corner, or maybe 2 versions away. But it is coming to Firefox now as well. So very excited about that. I'm glad I'm not the only one. So I'm going to be looking at this for layout purposes. Style queries have so many applications. I could do an entire talk just on these. But since we're focused on layout, I just want to look at this one where I have this side-scrolling component thing. Goes side to side. Maybe on mobile, that's fine. And when I get to a larger size, this area at the top continues side-scrolling, but this one down here doesn't. I'm doing this in a very simple way. I just have a container. It could even be a media query where I'm just changing how the columns are being created. But it's a little bit awkward that when we get to this size, this is still side-scrolling. If I'm on a desktop with a mouse, I don't want to, like, you have to hold shift to side-scroll. Nobody knows that. No normal user would know that. It's an awkward experience. And I'm on Chrome on Windows. I actually have a scroll bar. Some people might not even know that there's more content over there. It's not the greatest. So what I have done to set all of this up is I'm using a custom property. Don't worry, I know it looks kind of complicated. The main thing is I have this overflow grid direction that's defaulting to column. And I want to change the style of things if somebody changes that overflow grid direction to be a row. So because it's set up as a custom property, I have a container style query here. I'm going to say if somebody comes in and changes this to an overflow grid direction of row, we're going to apply different styles. And then I can come into the split class, which same idea as before. This is my split at the top, splits into 2 columns. I can then use that custom property to enable that style. And now here we've switched the direction and applied a few new styles to make sure it works. Now, some people watching this might be going, well, Kevin, it's a new feature. Browser support's not even quite perfect yet. And this is just a modifier class. What's the big deal? You could create a new class, do the exact same thing, and you'd be right. But what's powerful with this is you can move this custom property and apply it wherever you want. So I'm going to move it down inside of the splits container over here, or the container query over here. And when I do that, now this area still is the same. It's up and down. But if this gets to a smaller size and it wraps, now it's going back and being consistent with the one that's down here. So I'm conditionally applying this layout change based on where this item lives, as well as conditions within that specific item that are coming into play. And we can do more than just that, because I was doing this based on a custom property I'd set up specifically for that layout. But over here, I have this random custom property I just created. There's no application for this anywhere. I just made a card layout alternative, and I have some new styles in there. This would be the same as a modifier class. But once again, I can conditionally apply this only here. So the card layout can be alternative. And then at this size, nothing changes. But when we get to the other area over here, you can see now my title's on the left. The rest of the content is on the right. Maybe not the nicest design. but just a visual difference that we can see here. I'll let the designers come up with actual good use cases for this. But yeah, a nice way that we can apply that. Theming, I did mention theming is a big deal. So lower down, I also have this wouldn't really make sense in the container query. But theming, I could come in and do a card theme alternative. And you can come in with different theming options in different ways. And maybe that was, I don't remember what I called it. Let's find it. Accent, apologies. Card theme of accent. And then I can change the theme of my cards. Maybe that's card layout. I did it up at the top. Accent over here. And now we will, the joy of live coding. There we go. And that switches, and not the nicest theme, but for people also that work with web components, I know a lot of people are very excited about the possibilities this opens up, because you're just giving all these knobs and levers and different things that people can open up and control without having, breaking into the shadow DOM and everything, which is pretty interesting. As I said, I could keep going on style queries. We have a range syntax in there now, so you can provide numbers, and then it knows if it's greater than and smaller than a specific number, and you can do stuff based on that, or if it's equal to. There's some amazing things that we can do with them now. But more recently, the container query continued to evolve and has given us even more that we can do with the scroll state query as well. And scroll state queries, as you can see, these are new. There's no intent to ship as far as I know for Firefox or Safari. I hope they're working on it. But at least we can start playing around with it, seeing what's possible. And potentially some of these could be progressive enhancements as well. And so if I jump into what we can do with these, yes, I got the right one. OK. So actually, really fun, just to recap a little bit on our style queries I looked at. Other ways we can conditionally apply. Here I'm looking if we have 4 or more children, then I want to turn my scrolling on. So this one is scrolling here because there's more than 4 children, whereas this one isn't. But if it gets too narrow, I'm also turning scrolling on because I want to make sure at that point, it gets too squished. Eventually, maybe you want it scrolling there too. Lots of horizontal scrolling, which is not the best design pattern in my demos today, but that's OK. What's interesting here with scroll state queries is you can see I have this overflow grid. That's what's creating all of this. And I have a container type of scroll state. So this is really important. It's a new type of container type. You can be both, or you can be. An element can be both a container and size query if you need it to be. But in this case, I only need the scroll state container type. And then if I come down, I have some pseudo elements over here. And you can see I've already set up the scroll state, so the scroll state function, like we had the style function before. And I can actually look. This is on a pseudo element where I'm going to turn the opacity up if the parent is scrollable. And I did a bad job on this demo because I'm repeating a lot of code, but that's OK. We're going to do it for both my pseudo elements. If it's scrollable, we add some shadows or glows. This would be a nice dim, dark shadow if it wasn't on the big screen, but I wanted to make sure it would stand out. So we can now detect if an element is scrollable or not. And if this gets smaller, that one on the top gets the shadow too, because it's now detecting that there's scrolling available. And then we can turn off the scrolling there. That's kind of fun. But what about knowing what direction it can scroll in? Well, we can do that. So this is I put notes there. You could either do you could say left if you want, or you can use the logical variant, which would be inline start. And then I can come on this one over here and say scrollable inline end. And we can detect what direction it is scrollable. And so you'll see only the shadow on the right side is showing right now, because I'm scrolled all the way to the left. I can't go further that way. But as soon as I move over, it detects that, oh, I can scroll in both directions. And then if I go all the way over, it then turns off on that side, because it goes, oh, we can't scroll that way anymore, which I think is kind of interesting that we can detect these things now. There's more. You might have noticed there when I scrolled a little bit, it snapped into place. So as soon as I let go, it snaps. Scroll snapping is awesome. If you don't know about it, definitely look it up. And we can detect that with scroll state queries as well. So on my cards, the top demo will break for this, but only look at the bottom one. I'm going to reduce the scale of my cards and the opacity of my cards. And then I can say if the card has a scroll state of snapped. And what axis is it snapped on? So snapped on the inline axis. And then I can modify the scale. So now when I go over and I'm swiping through, the scale of my cards can be modified based on whichever one is currently being snapped or focused on by the user, which I think is kind of fun. Now, these two demos I think are kind of more fun. These are like niche applications. There's probably really creative ways you could use this. I sometimes struggle with coming up with awesome stuff, and then I show silly demos like this, and I always get very excited when people show me like, oh, I saw that demo you did, and I made this really amazing thing. So if anybody does that based on these, please let me know. But there is a few more applications that we can do with scroll state as well. The first one we're going to look at is I have a sticky header. Very common thing these days. Where the header just sticks. And I've done this in a kind of weird way, because I have a div of sticky header and then the header inside of that. I've done this on purpose, obviously. Because what I'm doing is creating a sticky header at the top. Don't worry about all those custom properties. It's just to change the colors and other stuff along the way to make it easier to adjust. So I have the sticky header, once again, container type of scroll state, and a position of sticky this time. That's why it's staying at the top. We have the top of 0 here. Then I can come into my header, and I can actually say on the header, container scroll state, and instead of relying on JavaScript to try and figure out when something sticks and then applying a conditional class, all those same styles that you would do with the additional class of stuck or whatever it is, you just say, is it stuck to the top? And you could use block start, I believe, as well. And if I do that, then I can, oh, we're going to get a weird thing. Well, there we go, whatever, it works. You can see that it moves in. I had an extra translate on here. But we get that idea where we can change the style of it when we scroll down, and then it changes again when I scroll up. The reason I had that really weird translate on there is because you can sort of have a little bit of fun. You can make your top stick like off the viewport, off the top, and then that's what I'm using this for. So I'm scrolling down 20 viewport height, and then once that happens, it's going to stick. And then I can actually have it slide back in and slide back out at the top. And I did this demo for YouTube. And people were like, oh, it's really fun, but what we like to do, or not what we like to do, but what is really we need to do is we need it so when you're scrolling down, we don't have the navigation, but as soon as the user scrolls up, then it slides in. And in my comments, I was like, oh, that'd be really nice, but you still need JavaScript for that, sorry. And then I think the day before I got on the plane to come here, I saw a Blue Sky post, I believe by Una Kravitz, that mentioned something about, or maybe it was someone else. There was a file issued. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, there was a Blue Sky post that caught my attention because they mentioned that behavior and saying that you could do it with this. And I looked into it. This is, I might screw this demo up. I do apologize if I do, because I'm not 100% confident. We've done it a few times, but I keep making mistakes on it. But we're going to try. HTML, we're going to say this has a container type of scroll state. And I'm doing it on the HTML element because it's the whole page that's scrolling, right? So I have to be paying attention to the page itself. And I am also going to give this a container name. The reason I'm giving this a container name is because my sticky header's there. It has a name. You might have other containers on your page. If you do a @container, like I've done here, or yeah, @container, and I just say scroll state, it's going to look at the nearest scroll state one, and you might have multiple. It might even look at the nearest container. I'm not actually 100% sure on that. I'd have to test it more. I want to make sure it's not looking at anything else. I want to make sure this is only looking at the what's happening with my HTML element. And I'm actually going to take this off for now. We're going to do a simplified version and then bring that back in. So we're going to say an @container. I'm going to say look at the root. So we write root, scroll state. And then we can say, I took a note, scrolled, because I always write this wrong. And I also do this wrong. I thought it was going to be down or up. It's not. It's top or bottom, or you can use block start and block end for the logical variants. So I want to say if the user has scrolled towards the bottom, we're going to make some changes to our header. The first thing I'm actually going to do, though, is also come here and say this is position fixed now. There might be some other ways to do it, but I did this really quickly. Top 0, width 100%. I think we need all of those things on there. Let's just see what happens. Whoops, 100%. If I do that, there we go. So this is just fixed to the top, very similar to what we had before. And then I can say here that I'm going to do a translate of 0, -100%. And I want to do that if the user has scrolled towards the bottom. So if I scroll, if it works, there we go. Yes, it worked. I'm so happy. So as soon as the user, thank you, as soon as the user scrolls down, well, then the translate kicks in, and it slides off. And as long as the user is scrolling down or not doing anything, that stays. And as soon as I scroll up, well, that's not true anymore, so it's able to come back into the viewport. And you could, of course, then apply other styles here. I don't know if you'd want to do that with this use case, but I can say scrolled up, and you could apply different styles. So if the user has scrolled up, I'm going to take this. I'll leave that. It's going to be kind of weird looking. But if we go down, we have one set of styles, and when I go up, oh, it didn't work. Scroll. Oh, we need the root on there as well. See, that's why the root is important. So now if I go that way, it goes away, and then when I go up, oh, it's still not working. Anyway, you get the idea. There would be a way of doing that. I'm not going to debug the whole thing right now, because it could take me a few minutes. There's probably a small typo somewhere. But you can apply different styles based on the scrolling direction that the user has, which I think is very exciting as well. And yeah, so all this is to say that the media query has served us well, and I also don't, it's not going anywhere. Media queries they're established, we know how to use them, and we're going to continue to use them. But they have their limitations because all they can see is the entire size of the viewport. And working that way with a lot of things doesn't make a lot of sense. These days, if we're using container queries, they open up a whole bunch of new possibilities that we can do. And to be able to leverage those, though, we can't treat them like a media query. If you try and do that, it's not going to work. If we do treat them differently, we can have them adapt to the different layout sizes that they have available, depending on whether that's doing content-first breakpoints with relative units, or just paying attention to, is it in a sidebar or not a sidebar? We can also work with intrinsic breakpoints in different ways. We can do some math to make it work within our grid layout. You can use viewport or container query units to detect wrapping and other things along the way there. And nowadays, of course, the ones that are very different is we can actually conditionally change layouts depending on where things are being placed and the conditions within those other areas these elements are being used. And soon, we'll be able to start adapting to user interactions as well, which is all very exciting. So while they often look a lot like a media query, container queries are very different, and they are a different feature that can do a lot more, but we do need to treat it differently to really open up all the possibilities that it does have. Thank you very much. Just really fast, I did just re-released my course, CSS Demystified. If you are interested and want to learn more, SmashingConf will get you 20% off if you want. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I'm going to leave that. Oh, I was going to leave that on the screen for a second for people to see it. Maybe it was just there. We go. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Just leave that for a second so people get a chance because you didn't get much of an opportunity to share that. It blows my mind some of the things that we can do in CSS now, and you know, I glibly joked about like tables and spaces at the start, but it feels like the dam has burst now, right? You can kind of do anything with layouts, it feels like. I really enjoyed the segment of your talk where you were kind of showing editing a layout with cards that were then starting to span 2 columns, you know, and it was a bit of a conversation, you know, with a designer, right? And a few times over the course of the conference, we've talked about, you know, that boundary. I don't think we've used the term throwing things over the wall, but certainly, you know, the divide. Does it feel now that with the capabilities that we've got in CSS, so it's almost important for the developer to be explaining that to designers as well and say, well, actually, here's some possibilities for you to kind of inform design decisions? How do those conversations happen? Have you seen that much?
I think it is really important. A little bit like, I mean, we've had a few people talking about that so far, about how you can do more in code than you can in Figma or the other design tools. Yeah. And I think it's really important that the designers are aware of that, and there has to be that open communication of like, because if not, they're not going to even think about it, right? Like, yeah. So I think there needs to be that line of communication to be like, I could do this as well, like, and it's hard to do that because often I feel like it feels like it's that direction, right? This is the steps we follow. We have the design, we have the handoff, and then we just take that and do things with it. It's often hard to have those lines of communication, but if you can have them, just show like a quick CodePen demo, just to show something that's like, oh, you made this design, what about if we did this with it, just as an idea, and see like.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on that kind of theme, Taman asked in the notes. In fact, he latched onto the cruelness that I had in my intro to you and said, "Will you take part in the CSS battle next year?" Which I'm not going to put you on the spot.
I was devastated when I lost, and
so sorry.
I definitely am hoping they invite me back because I want my revenge.
You didn't lose. It's just that you weren't the champion.
I lost.
Okay, but Damon went on to ask, on a more serious note, are there any resources that you would? I mean, this comes back to our theme about the conversation with designers and expressing what's possible. Are there any good resources that you would recommend for designers to see what the capabilities of like modern? I mean, I think there ought to be. This wasn't trying to tee you up for this answer, but are there any resources online you would recommend, Kevin Powell?
There is a decent YouTube channel. That I mean, there's CSS tricks. There's front end masters blog, where Chris Coyer is now. That's doing a lot of awesome stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, when even people are trying to know what's possible with CSS, I always say follow all the DevRel people that work for the teams.
Right. Yeah.
So there's
totally.
like Una and Bramis at Chrome.
Yep.
There's Jen Simmons at Safari and Jake Archibald now at Firefox.
Yep.
They're just constantly putting out demos of like, here's what's coming next, and they build a quick demo and show it. It's like that's the best way to know what's actually possible, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. And I know you're bashful about saying it, but I would say that your channel is the content on there is encapsulated in such a way that it is digestible to say, okay, here's a new feature, here's some stuff you can do with it.
Thank you.
Very much in the way that you've been showing today. Okay, switching gear a tiny bit. There was an observation made that, it's impossible to get away from conversations about AI when we're talking at the moment, right? And there was an observation made that so often when people like bootstrap a new project or vibe code something, there's a very strong tendency towards tailwind, right? And I think that's, a virtue of tailwind being documented in the way that it was and being so descriptive and definitive in the kind of things that it can do. I suppose that yields well for large language models to understand that. But it's not to everyone's taste, and it doesn't necessarily afford the greatest flexibility and kind of expression. Do you do much with AI yourself when it comes to vibe coding or generating things? And if you do, are there any tips that you have for steering your agents to work with CSS rather than utility classes?
I don't use it very much.
Okay.
So I wish I had some advice there.
No, that's fine. I mean, I don't use it as a perfectly legitimate answer.
First of all, I enjoy writing CSS and doing a lot of this other parts of development as well. So and I, as a content creator and educator, I think it's important I know what's going on and understanding what I'm doing. But at the same time, because I understand, and I'm sure people have seen this in the things they are really good at, is if I have experimented with it, played with it, and I probably will do more content around it at one point because people are always asking me could you get AI to do that and how would you do it? And anytime I have experimented with it, I notice there's always these small innocuous lines that it adds. They don't do anything maybe wrong for that example, but you're oh, you don't really need that there, or they're not relying on inheritance in the way that you can rely on. There's these small little things that on a one-off really don't matter, but when it comes to scaling up, you're okay, that's going to cause some problems down the road. And it's the type of thing that a developer could easily be making too if you don't know any better, but when you know the thing really well. So I'm always hesitant if I'm doing it with something else that I'm not as comfortable with, that just means it's making those same things and I'm not noticing it.
Yeah.
That it's always so I'm always a little bit hesitant.
Right, and
especially for just taking the code and writing it. I have used it for sort of changing my custom property names because it's tedious.
Sure.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And and in fairness as well, a lot of the work that you do is kind of at the coalface of understanding emerging CSS patterns, properties, and experimenting with those and expressing them. And that information needs to get out into the public domain before it is available for other things to pick up on, right? So that's fair. So there's another question that came in was about cross-browser support, and you did talk a little bit about progressive enhancement, but the question was, what type of advice would you give about properties that don't yet have good cross-browser support? Do a lot of the things, particularly to do with layout, which of course is so fundamental do they have good progressive enhancement stories, and how do we kind of walk that line?
Definitely, I'm a huge fan of subgrid. That was a hard one because when it wasn't well supported, it's hard to say like, oh, just use subgrid there, because if it fails, there were certain situations you could definitely use it as a progressive enhancement, especially if it was on rows, because if it doesn't align that way, it just means things aren't perfectly aligned, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But with columns, if that starts breaking down, it can cause a bit of havoc. So that was a tough one that I'm happy is there. Yeah, for layout, it can be a bit tricky because it could just trigger issues.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different ways of doing it too, because you can just rely on if it's supported, this is going to work, and if it's not supported, it doesn't work. But we also have feature queries, so you can say like, like, is this supported? Or here's like the base, and then if it's supported, do this instead. And I think that's a nice way to work because you're future-proofing in a way of using that feature, and once it's available, people get it, but it doesn't break everything if it's not supported.
It is nice to be able to work in a way that, you know, a lot of people will experience it in the way that you intend, or your first choice, and then other people won't yet, but they'll have a good experience. But one day, it will just magically start working.
But I do hear from a lot of people, they're like, oh, I wish I could do that at work, but the people above them are like, no, it has to be the same everywhere, and you sort of get stuck. So I know that's...
Yeah, oh no, believe me, I'm familiar with that. I used to work at British Telecom, and a lot of, any large enterprise, it's like, okay, well, we dictate that you can use this browser. And so it was many years behind. Thank goodness for evergreen browsers these days. That is such a game changer. So we're coming out shorter time shortly, but I'm curious, someone like yourself who's always experimenting with the latest ways of doing things and latest capabilities, I imagine you also browse the web from time to time. So do you sometimes find yourself stumbling across something and you're like, what's happening there? How did they do that? And go spelunking. Is that something that is a regular kind of itch for you that you're trying to scratch? Or are you seeing things around on the web? So how am I going to do that?
Yeah, it doesn't happen as much these days. I don't know why, but it definitely has. It's a thing that I do enjoy. A lot of the time it'd be someone pointing me to something like, how did someone do this? And then I look at it, I'm like, that's cool. How did they do that? And then you're sort of poking around at it. Or sometimes I do that for content where I'm like, I don't know how they did it. I'm going to try and do it and then see what the differences were. Just because it's fun to try and make these weird, quirky things.
It's kind of one of the joys of the web as well, isn't it? That it's like, okay, I can consume it, but now I can go and poke around. And I've learned so much from ViewSource over the years, right, and inspectors. Okay, probably time for our last question, and maybe I should have asked this sooner because maybe it'll be a long answer. But there was a question about dealing with legacy code. Writing demos from a greenfield is brilliant, and it's kind of a luxury. Do you work much with large code bases, or because of the type of work that you're doing, are you not so much in that world?
Yeah, I'm the lucky one who gets to sort of do whatever I want. So I don't have to deal with that problem very much.
Okay.
I have done work with legacy code bases in trying to help people that are running into problems or doing some consulting to try and help out. It can be really hard. There's different strategies you can take. These days, actually, with cascade layers, I think is a nice way just to sort of separate things a little bit.
Okay.
The classic one was just prefixing with the new CSS, just to make sure, prefix like new.card or whatever, your design system initials or something, just to make sure. Because even I was talking to Manuel yesterday over some beers, and he was talking about a project where they had people helping them with something, but the code they were writing on the new update was conflicting with their old styles, and so all the old stuff was breaking. Not all of it, but you'd run into these weird things where this old style would break because they weren't taking. There was no strategy in place. So I think that's the most important thing, is just making sure that you're not going to accidentally have the same class name, which is already something that you need to make sure you don't do. But especially if you're updating on a legacy code base, finding a way to do that won't get you in trouble.
It's a very hard problem. It's a challenge. Okay, thank you so much for chatting with me and for a wonderful talk. Please, everyone, a big round of applause for Kevin Powell.
Thank you so much. Thanks.